Welcome to the Caw Caw Interpretive Center audio guide, which will cover all 9 kiosk signs at Caw Caw Interpretive Center. This audio guide is available for use while at the Caw Caw Interpretive Center or anywhere you choose. If you are at Caw Caw, feel free to pause the video until you reach the next sign, but you can listen in any order you like. To prepare for your visit, the Caw Caw Interpretive Center offers accessible parking as well as accessible paths that can be used to reach the restrooms, drinking fountains, and picnic tables. There are 6 miles of well-marked, unpaved trails that are mostly flat, but some have uneven surfaces because of tree roots, grass, or other natural elements. Along the trails, there are also benches to sit on. The Inland Rice Field Overlook Boardwalk has railings and bumpers throughout and can be used to explore different habitats and historical sites. Step back in time by viewing the technology that made Charleston the richest city in the United States. Learn how enslaved Africans and African Americans transformed low-country swamps into rice fields. See how Carolina Gold rice was grown. Then enter the realm of nature and through the colorful exhibits, experience the sights, sounds, and textures of wildlife at Caw Caw Interpretive Center. Learn to identify some of the birds that inhabit the area. More than 240 species have been identified here. More than 400 plant species have been identified in 11 botanical communities at Caw Caw Interpretive Center. Essential pollinators like butterflies, moths, and hummingbirds are attracted to food plants in our gardens. The diversity of vegetation represents 1/6 of all plant species that occur on the South Carolina coastal plain. The major plant communities include salt, brackish, and freshwater marshes, swamps, bottomland hardwood forests, and mixed hardwood pine forests. Many of the wetland habitats are carefully managed, with water level and salinity controlled to influence conditions for wildlife feeding and nesting areas. Caw Caw Interpretive Center is a 654-acre natural and cultural history center named for the vast Caw Caw Swamp, which drains a 20-square-mile area and flows in a southeasterly direction through the site. Once part of several plantations, this site was developed for rice cultivation during the 1700s. Growers utilized the inland system of rice culture. Reservoirs established in the deep swamps, irrigated fields cleared and planted by enslaved Africans and African Americans. Today, these former rice fields make up 5 distinct wetland systems managed to support a variety of wildlife. From trails and observation decks, you will see a vast network of former fields, dikes, canals, and ditches, and water control devices that attest to the Africans' specialized knowledge. In the early 1900s, the American Tea Company cultivated tea on this site and adjacent land. Thousands of naturalized tea plants planted over a century ago thrive along the maritime forests and bottomland hardwood forest trails. Caution: Caw Caw Interpretive Center is a wildlife sanctuary. Potentially hazardous animals and plants are a part of nature. Please stay on the trails and be aware of your surroundings. Kiosk 3, Swamp Sanctuary. An old dike crosses the swamp forest that was a part of historic rice fields. Today, the former field on the left is now a large freshwater reserve or reservoir. It collects fresh runoff waters from a tributary of Caw Caw Swamp. Caw Caw Interpretive Center controls the water level to enhance wildlife habitat in the Maple Willow Swamp. Farther down the Swamp Sanctuary Trail, a boardwalk winds through another fascinating wetland, the Cypress Tupelo Swamp. The low hammock of trees on the right side of this dike is a favorite resting area for small American alligators. After hatching in late summer, young alligators move to areas such as this where they hide from predators, adult alligators, and wading birds, and find food like the yellow-bellied sliders. In the deep hole by the spillway, the gators hunt turtles, crustaceans, frogs, snakes, insects, and small mammals. As you hike along the Swamp Sanctuary Trail, be sure to visit the Georgia Pacific Swamp Boardwalk. The boardwalk meanders through the Cypress Tupelo Swamp with intermittent bumpers and railings throughout. The dense canopy of bald cypress and water tupelo trees cast an aurora of cool green light in the swamp forest. You have a clear view of the Maple Willow Swamp from this high bank. The dominant canopy and sub-canopy plants are red maple, black willow, and the tall shrub common buttonbush. These species have shallow roots that absorb oxygen and nutrients from the soggy swamp soils. Fast-growing and often multi-trunked, maples and willows provide important perches for roosting white ibis, green herons, and other water birds. In summer, duckweeds, pennywort, and other plants cover the water. The tangled green mat is a floating home for snakes, frogs, and countless invertebrates. Caw Caw Interpretive Center, in partnership with the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources and Ducks Unlimited, operates a program to encourage wood ducks. Indigenous in South Carolina, wood ducks prefer to nest in the cavities of swamp trees. Nest boxes like the ones seen from this dike have been erected in the flooded wetlands to increase the number of safe nesting cavities. During spring and summer, these nest boxes have been successfully occupied by wood ducks since 1995. The eastern cottonmouth, also called water moccasin, is a resident of freshwater wetlands. Dark brown to gray, this heavy-bodied snake basks along the edge of wet areas and may be seen from this trail. Caution: the cottonmouth is venomous. Keep your distance. Do not attempt to approach or harass this reptile. Watch for tracks and other signs of animal life along the swamp sanctuary trail. Alligators often travel on this dike and crush large patches of grass where pass across the top of the dike and leave white, pasty excrement. River otters are active. They often create slides to enter the water. Tracks, best seen in soft sand or mud, are five-toed and webbed. Droppings contain many fish bones and scales. Owls and other raptors sometimes swallow their prey whole and later regurgitate pellets of fur, feathers, and small bones. Kiosk 4, the Stono Slave Uprising, Freedom or Death. The largest slave uprising in British North America partly occurred at this park on Sunday, September 9th, 1739. About 20 Angolan slaves, led by Jemmy, raided Hutchinson's store. Decapitated shopkeepers Bathurst and Gibbs, stole arms and ammunition, then marched south along Pon's Road. While most agree that Angolan sought promised freedom in Spanish Florida, the few historical documents, all from a white perspective, do not reveal their true motivations. Discriminately, raiding and burning, or attempting to, the freedom seekers attacked at least 4 white properties while recruiting more participants, some willingly, some forcefully, until they numbered between 60 and 100. Carrying flags, beating drums, and shouting "Liberty," they marched into the path of South Carolina Lieutenant Governor William Bull. He retreated to alert Captain B, who formed a militia of men, largely from Willtown Presbyterian Church, to pursue the rebels. Meanwhile, the freedom seekers raided and burned at least 5 additional plantations, killing most whites present. By 4 p.m., they stopped near the Edisto River. When 60 to 100 militia arrived, battle ensued. 20 to 40 whites and 10 to 51 freedom seekers were killed that day. Many escaped only to be captured and executed later by militia and hired Chickasaw and Catawba Indians. One was not captured for 3 years. Those pressed into the rebellion were returned to their plantations, and those not killed during battle were executed, some decapitated, their heads placed along the road back to Charleston as a warning. The uprising had long-reaching effects. In 1740, the passage of a new slave act severely restricted the enslaved and became the basis of future slave laws that helped to create a legacy of racism. This racism was illustrated by such practices as Jim Crow laws that ensured segregation and discrimination, acts of terrorism, and resistance by many whites to civil rights reform. Unfortunately, racial tensions still exist, but there is a growing willingness to talk and reconcile. The Stono Slave Uprising is just one point of departure from which discussions can begin that can lead to reconciliation. The location of Hutchinson's store became a national historic landmark on the strength of oral tradition. Today, remnants of a cellar believed by some to be associated with the store remain. The site where 18th century social strife erupted into rebellion is also remembered by locals as a site used by the KKK to burn crosses during the late 20th century. Ironically, it is now used for peaceful purposes. It is home to the African American Sea Island Farmers Cooperative. Contemporary sources describe the rebels next raiding and burning Mr. Godfrey's and Mr. Lemmy's plantations, killing them and their families. Wallace's Tavern was spared because he was good to his slaves. The exact location of these places are unknown, but research continues. Thomas Eliot and Thomas Rose, whose plantations make up portions of this park, were defended by July, Ralph, Joe, LaRouche, Pompey, and 3 other unnamed enslaved Africans and African Americans, one a woman. Each was rewarded with new clothes and money. July received his freedom because he killed a rebel. Why defend Elliot and Rose, we will never know, but their actions provoke questions about the complexities of enslavement. With so many eyewitnesses, why is there only one first-hand account of the day? Were whites concerned the news of the rebellion may inspire more rebellion? We may never know because Lieutenant Governor Bull's report contains few details. Plantations near the Edisto River were all attacked and burned, and all whites reported killed, except Bullock, who escaped. Bullock's son became Patriot Governor of Georgia during the American Revolution and is the great-great-grandfather of President Theodore Roosevelt. Why did the rebels stop? Some historians believe to engage in an Angolan war ritual of dancing, music, and drinking, but once the militia arrived, a fierce battle began. Most sources are vague. However, one source, explicit in its gruesome detail of the battle, includes an exchange between a slave and his master. The slave misfired his pistol while attempting to kill his master. In turn, the master shot the man through the head, uncovering evidence of a unique culture. Many of these massive live oak trees shaded a yard where much of the Laurel Hill plantation's domestic activities occurred. The road on which you stand was traveled daily by enslaved Africans and African Americans moving between nearby quarters and fields where they cultivated rice and other crops. It was in the quarters, or yards, and fields that enslaved Africans and African Americans of the Low Country developed the Gullah language and culture that still lives today. Caw Caw Interpretive Center has done several archaeological investigations of this site and others. The knowledge gained by doing these investigations, combined with ongoing research of documents, plats, and maps, continually enrich our understanding of the complex community that once existed here. If you see an artifact, please leave it exactly as you found it and notify staff. Without these important remnants of people's lives, we will have an incomplete understanding of their incredible story. European ceramics and glassware mixed with colonialware or handmade African pottery provide evidence of how Europe and Africa may have influenced Gullah culture. The 1739 slave rebellion occurred here. Also, during the American Revolution, considerable military action took place in this area. The fighting involved whites and Africans battling for both patriots and loyalists. A fired musket ball and a Revolutionary War militia button uncovered at the site raised more questions than answers. Kiosk 5. Swamps to rice fields. Swamps converted into rice fields are now marshes maintained for wildlife. This bank, originally constructed to separate fields and controlled water depth for rice cultivation, now serves similar purposes for natural resource management. In the open wetlands, there are parallel beds of tall plants rising out of the water where rice used to grow. Wild plants have colonized the long, raised beds of organic soil originally built by enslaved Africans and African Americans for growing highly valued rice called Carolina gold. Shallow ditches called quarter drains originally separated quarter-acre rice beds. The drains distributed water evenly over the field and measured individual tasks required of field hands. Many experts believe the task system played a significant role in the creation of Gullah culture, as many tasks could be completed by mid-afternoon, allowing time for the exchange of diverse cultural elements represented within slave communities. If you hear a rustling in the sedge and grasses near this dike, chances are a raccoon may be near. Related to the bear, the raccoon is known by its black mask, bushy fur, and ringed tail. It is omnivorous, meaning it eats many kinds of food, from crayfish, small mammals, and frogs to fruits, vegetables, and even household trash. Water plays a key role in the life of raccoons. The practice of holding their food in water, called washing, in fact stimulates their sense of touch, allowing them to discard inedible parts. A network of narrow, meandering trails through the grass is a clue that white-tailed deer inhabit these marshes. Here, the deer can hide from predators, find fresh water to drink, and rest during daytime. When not at rest, small groups of deer spend much of their time browsing on leaves, twigs, vines, flowers, berries, acorns, and other vegetation. If the dominant deer senses danger, it raises its tail, exposing white fur underneath. This flag signals the others to flee at speeds over 30 miles per hour. These marshlands are home to the American